Welcome back. All right, so as promised, we will now talk about the unrestricted free agents in the East. So as I mentioned earlier today, I was going to do the East before I was done for today. And here we are. And again, it's from Boston to Washington, all 16 teams. Let's start off with Boston. They have some cap challenges, so we'll see whether they can bring in these guys back. Orlov had a great start, quieter towards the end of his time in Boston, but still, if they were able to find a way to bring him back, I don't know how you do it, but I think they'll try. Same with Bertuzzi. I thought Bertuzzi was a good addition at the deadline. Nick Foligno, it feels like probably done with Boston. Patrice Bergeron, either he's a Bruin or he's not playing. So for Bergeron, if he wants to come back, Boston will absolutely keep room for him. I just don't know. It feels like at the end of those playoffs that was it for Bergeron. It felt different than other exits, that he was more emotional and his teammates were very complimentary of him in general, and just it feels like that's probably it. Tomas Nosek, good fourth liner for the Boston Bruins. He's a good bottom six forward, could be a solid addition for somebody else in the event he does leave Boston. Same with Garnet Hathaway. The depth in Boston's been really good. It's going to be tested next season. Of course, if Bergeron and Krejci don't return next year, center depth will be an issue. Chris Wagner, UFA this year as well. Anton Stralman. This is where people say Stralman belonged to the Bruins. Yep. David Krejci. Of course, Krejci and Bergeron both could retire. We'll see if either of them decide to come back. Connor Clifton, depth defenseman. Can he be replaced? Yes. Would I like to see him in Boston? Also yes. Connor Carrick, veteran forward or veteran defensive depth. And so we'll see whether or not they bring him back. And Joona Koppanen, just played a handful of games, probably goes to market. Buffalo doesn't have a lot when it comes to UFAs. They've got Zemgus Girgensons. I would think they find a way to keep him the same as they did with Okposo. Vinny Hinostroza had an up and down season. If he goes to market, we'll see. We'll see if there's a market for Vinny Hinostroza. I thought he was better when he came up and played for Buffalo after being down for a while, but again, we'll see if any GMs want to pick him up. Austin Strand, UFA as well, and Lawrence Pilot, who they picked up and brought back over. Didn't use him a ton this time around either. And then on the Canes side of things, there are a lot of players for Carolina here, starting with Max Pacioretty, who tragically only played a few games before re-aggravating the Achilles injury. Jordan Staal is their leader. I'd be very surprised if he doesn't re-sign. Shane Gostisbehere. Ghost played better in Arizona than he did in Carolina. I think there's a market for a guy with a shot like that who can run a power play. And so he may, and I mentioned this in the first video, he may be one of those guys who gets money that we look at and say, wow, that seems like a lot for Ghost. But there may be a GM out there that's willing to pay a premium for an offensive defenseman that can run a power play. Freddie Anderson, I think he returns to Carolina. I get the feeling it'll be Anderson and Kochetkov, but we'll see. Because you've also got Antti Rantas on the board too. So if they go with the cheaper route, that would be Ronta. I think Ranta's demands would be lower than Anderson's. But yeah, your guess is as good as mine on that one. And then Jake Gardiner is sandwiched in between the two of them. Gardiner hasn't played in, what is it, a full 2 seasons now? So, I mean, he's probably done as a player at the NHL level. His contract's done now. Jesper Fast, I thought played well during the playoffs. I'd be kind of surprised if they don't find a way to keep him. Andre Kasha, injured yet again, I would think goes to market, might end up playing in Europe. He's been through a number of teams now over the last few years. It's an issue where he can't stay healthy. Paul Stastny said after the playoff run was done for Carolina, he was going to think things over and whether or not his career was going to continue. That has yet to be decided. Calvin DeHaan played roughly 50 games with Carolina this year, depth defenseman. And Derek Stepan, who's probably done in Carolina, but it sounds like he wants to stick around and keep playing. And maybe the Canes can figure out a way to hold on to him. Columbus, not a lot here in terms of name value. So you have John Gillies at the top of the list. Again, I went through Cap Friendly and just went by cap hit for most of these guys. Lane Peterson, who I thought was a solid pickup from Vancouver. When Vancouver waived him, I was honestly a little bit surprised. But we'll see whether or not he has a spot with the Columbus Blue Jackets next year. Yuna Luoto, another UFA. Michael Hutchinson, goaltender, been around for a very long time. If he wants to play, somebody will pay him. Somebody will pay him to be that number 3, and they'll put him in the AHL. Gavin Bayreuther. I like Bayreuther's work ethic, and he's a number 7 defenseman who can jump into the lineup in a bottom 2 role as need be. And Justin Richards, also UFA this summer. So again, for Columbus, not a lot in terms of name value, but there's guys there. Detroit, starting with Pia Suter. Up and down year for Suter. I'd be kind of surprised if Detroit brings him back. I feel like Yzerman's going to be on the market this year looking for, I'll say, 2 or 3 key pieces on the market. Bring in some UFAs to speed things up, on top of prospects coming up as well. Alex Nedeljkovic. Nedeljkovic, I think, played well enough that he'll get a look. I do think somebody will give him a contract. I don't think it's going to be multi-millions or anything, but I think somebody will give him a contract again as a potential number 3. Adam Ernie, depth forward. Jordan Osterley, depth defenseman. Robert Haig, same thing. Alex Chason was a great story this year for Detroit. They signed him. He was very emotional when he was signed. I don't know that there's a job for him in Detroit next year. And in the event Detroit doesn't bring him back, he'll probably be on a tryout again. I feel for Chason because every year he's on a tryout, and in this case, he wasn't signed to a contract till late in the season. Dylan McElrath, there may be those who are like, McElrath's starting? Yeah, he played some games for Detroit this year. And Magnus Hellberg, goaltender as well. Detroit, it looks like, going to probably go out and find themselves another goaltender. And yeah, I would be a little bit surprised if either Hellberg or Nedeljkovic came back, but it feels like maybe Yzerman would give Hellberg, a year and give him maybe a 2-way contract and try to sneak him through waivers in September. Florida. So Florida, of course, in the Stanley Cup Final starting on Saturday. They're pending UFAs Patrick Hornquist, who has not played during this run to the Stanley Cup Final. Radko Gudas has been excellent. He has only increased his value over these playoffs. Mark Stahl and Eric Stahl are both on expiring deals. In the event those deals expire, who knows? Maybe they end up in Carolina with their brother, who's also on an expiring deal. So technically, a team on July 1st could sign all 3 of the Stahl brothers. So let me know in the comment section below why it would be Montreal and how. And then Alex Lyon. Alex Lyon, who I think proved in the playoffs this year, he's good enough to at least be considered for a backup in the National Hockey League. We'll see if that happens. Montreal, we have Sean Monahan, Jonathan Drouin, and Paul Byron. So those are 3 players who missed a lot of time with injuries. So man games lost should drop without those guys there. And I'm not even trying to be sarcastic. Just those guys take up some cap space. And with the 3 of those contracts coming off the books, Montreal has some money this summer. They may very well be able to go out and add. Frederick Allard, I would think if they try to bring him back, league minimum probably works. Anthony Richard, I'd like to see get another chance because his last name's Richard. Feels like he should be a Montreal Canadian. If your last name's Richard, you belong in Montreal. That should just be a rule. Corey Schooneman, depth defenseman. Alex Belzile, I thought played pretty darn well for them on the 4th line, and in case he doesn't return to Montreal, I would think somebody will pick him up for 4th line minutes. Chris Tierney played all right with Montreal, may very well be out of the league next year, but again, that can be hard to predict too. Then we get to New Jersey, so the last one in this column. Tomas Tatar had a up and down season during the playoffs. I thought he played well. If New Jersey wants to bring him back, they can. Same with Damon Severson. Severson, as long as he's not being overplayed, he's a useful player. But we'll see what they do. Jonathan Bernier, who they were hoping to get back this year, and he didn't come back this year. His career may be finished. That's been the rumor for at least a year now. Miles Wood might stick around, but Devils fans tell me he won't. So I'll go ahead and say, all right, Devils fans say he won't. So Miles Wood is gone. Ryan Graves, maybe they bring him back again. New Jersey, a team that's looking to fix things up a little bit and get themselves a little bit closer to that Stanley Cup championship they haven't won in 20 years. And Eric Haula. Haula has been through, I think it's 56 teams over the last 5 years. It just feels that way. Anyways, Haula as a UFA, maybe he'll hit the Sillinger mark. I'm waiting till somebody hits the Sillinger mark. Somebody has to hit that most teams played for record somewhere along the way. Then we get to the Islanders. Semyon Varlamov, probably gone. The Islanders are very good at getting guys for value, a really good value in net. And they clearly have excellent goaltending coaching there in that every goaltender that comes through the Islanders looks pretty good. So Varlamov probably on his way out. Richard Panik, yep, I had to put Panik up there. So most of these guys have played at least one game this year in the NHL. I didn't get into guys who were in the AHL all year, but Panik, I don't think played a game this year with the Islanders, but man, I have the Panic Index, and I use his picture for all of them, so I'm not going to get new NHL pictures for him, and that's kind of sad. Pierre Engvall. Engvall played quite well for the Islanders after the trade from Toronto. One of two things. Either he re-signs with the Islanders or somebody's going to pick him up, and he may get some money. Again, he showed some touch around the net when he was with the Islanders, and that's going to get some attention. This is a league now where goal scoring is back. Scott Mayfield. There were all kinds of rumors about him getting dealt at the deadline. That didn't end up happening because it doesn't make any sense to rent out a defenseman at the deadline so you can go out and get a rental yourself because your team's in a playoff hunt. So it was like it was their own rental with Mayfield. Zach Parise, we'll see if they bring him back. The team, I think, needs to get younger. Now, whether or not that means bringing back Zach Parise or looking in another direction, we shall see. We'll see what Lou Lamoriello decides to do as well. Parker Wotherspoon, another one, played some games. And Cole Bardreau. Bardreau played with them a little bit here and there, but again, didn't really show a whole lot. And then we get to the Rangers, and we start with Patrick Kane, who has said had hip surgery today. He's out 4 to 6 months. So he's not going to get $10.5 million as his cap hit, but how much is Kane worth? And where is he worth that money? And then right under him is Vlad Tarasenko. And sadly, those are your biggest names on this free agent market. I saw a comment on the Western one too saying, well, you know, all the big names are in the East because they all got traded out. There aren't really very many big names on this board at all. Again, if your team needs some major makeover, I don't think this year's free agent class is going to get it done. I think they'll have to go via the trade route, which is fine. I love trades. So Vlad Tarasenko, if they want to keep one of the two, I would think Vlad's the one that comes back to New York, but how much is that worth to New York and for how long? Nico Mikkola, probably done with the New York Rangers. It wasn't a great run for him there. Yaroslav Halak, it might be the end of the road for Halak unless the Rangers offer him a one-year contract. He did have a much better year this year with the Rangers than he did in previous seasons with Vancouver and Boston. Tyler Mott, solid fourth liner. If they decide to keep him, great, good for them. And if he decides to come back to Vancouver, who don't have any cap space to sign him, but I'd welcome him back open arms. And then you've got Ryan Carpenter, didn't play very many games this year. Again, depth forward. Anton Bleed, depth forward. William Lockwood, same thing. William Lockwood coming over, of course, from the Canucks at the deadline. And he is really just a depth forward. And so I would not be surprised to see him end up back in Vancouver just for ending up back here in Abbotsford. That would not entirely surprise me. The Ottawa Senators, Cam Talbot. So Talbot, there was a lot of discussion about whether or not he'd be the starter next year, but nope, he's going to hit the market. He'll be one of the bigger goaltenders in this free agent class too. There's not a lot of really good goaltenders. You got Reimer, you got Talbot. Odds are they're probably going to get 1A, 1B situations or maybe end up getting backup jobs. Travis Hamonic, we'll see what Hamonic wants to do. That's really been the question mark with him. Where does he want to play? And when's he going to say, yeah, I'm just going to take my ball and go home? He seems like the kind of player that will be completely fine with just deciding one day to say, no, I'm good, I'm out. Austin Watson, depth, gritty forward, bottom six. We'll see where he ends up. Nick Holden, blue liner. Patrick Brown, a rental at the deadline. Derek Brassard, injured to finish out the season, and it felt like that might be career-ending too. So we'll see what his status is and whether or not he wants to come back, or whether or not he can come back next year. I mentioned the Mike Sillinger record for the most teams played for. Brassard's last count I had was 10. He's played for 10 organizations at the National Hockey League level. Sillinger's record is 12. So he's not that far off, really. But we'll see if he comes back this coming season. And Jacob Lucchini, who was a bit of a story for the Ottawa Senators when he got called up there, he's a UFA this summer too. Philadelphia does not have much. They have James Van Riemsdyk. They have Brendan Lemieux. I think they'll try to hold on to Lemieux if they haven't already. And Jackson Cates. So with Jackson Cates going to market, that means I won't have to worry about which Cates it is. Although Jackson only played 5 games this year, so really wasn't a problem this year very much. But there were games for Philadelphia over the last couple of years where an announcer would say Cates, and I'm like, which one? Is it Jackson? Is it Noah Cates? And so now Noah Cates, clearly the NHLer, Jackson playing a lot of time in the AHL. We'll see if they decide to keep them around, keep them together. Pittsburgh. Pittsburgh's got some guys, and as Dubas mentioned in a press conference today, they're sitting with roughly $20 million in cap space to replace some guys or try to keep them around. You have Jason Zucker, 20-goal scorer on the wing, can score 25. Brian Dumoulin, top 4 defenseman, maybe top 6, depends on who you ask. Opinions on him have dropped in the last year or two, but he's still a National Hockey League level defenseman. Tristan Jarry, is he the best of the goaltenders that are on this market? He's going to be up there. I mean, I don't know if I'd have him below Talbot. I don't think I would. I definitely wouldn't have him below Reimer. So, yeah, if Jarry hits the market, he would be the best goaltender, I would think, out of the free agents. And then you got Dmitry Kulikov, rental at the deadline. Nick Bonino, same thing. Danton Heinen, probably done in Pittsburgh. He's had his ups and downs over the last few years. He can be a third liner. Josh Archibald and Drake Caggiula, 2 former Edmonton Oilers. Caggiula only getting a handful of games this year, and so we'll see if they get contracts. Tampa Bay, there is a name here from Tampa Bay. Alex Killorn. Killorn will attract some offers, and again, one thing I'll watch for in this market, because there aren't very many big names in this free agent market, we might get those bidding wars. It could happen, and so we'll see if there's some head-scratching contracts, and maybe Killorn's one of those. Ian Cole, solid top 4/top 6 as well. He's bounced around a bit lately. Pierre-Edouard Bellemare, 4th liner, late 30s. We'll see if he has a job next year. Corey Perry's a fascinating one. I've seen articles wanting Corey Perry on certain various teams. One thing with Perry this year, though, is the offense just didn't come around. So in previous seasons, he's had his downbeats, but that offense usually shows up at some point. It really didn't this year. And I think he's maybe at the end. Maybe this is the summer where he says down and he hangs him up. We'll see soon enough, right? The summer's right around the corner. Brian Elliott, a veteran goaltender who's been their backup for a couple of years. Again, if they decide to move on from him, there are various goaltenders on this board that could work. It's a backup for Vasilevsky. You're not going to play a ton. Dustin Tokarski was brought in as the number 3, fulfills that role relatively well. Toronto, lots of names with the Leafs, starting with Ryan O'Reilly. They want to keep O'Reilly, right? I mean, if you're a GM, you want to keep Ryan O'Reilly. Excellent player that even though, yeah, offensively he may not be the player he was, say, 5 years ago, he's still a good foot soldier. He's got some experience, and he's a good leader as well. So I think if Toronto can hold on to him, they will. Alex Kerfoot might be done. Again, it depends what Toronto wants to do. Justin Hall, I know there's Leaf fans that would love to see Justin Hall end up not being a Leaf anymore, and we'll see if that is in fact the case. There are some Leaf fans that really like Hall as well. The analytics aren't bad with Hall. It's just the eye test, it seems like, where people get mad at him. David Kampf, solid depth forward, hardworking. If he hits the market, there will be teams that want his services. Noel Acciari, much the same thing. Good hard worker. Michael Bunting is going to be one to watch. Bunting may end up being one of those guys who attracts way more attention than we might think, because again, it is a shallow free agent pool, and Bunting has some natural talent as a forward, as he showed in Arizona, and then as he's shown in Toronto as well. So if he ends up hitting the market, if Toronto can't find the money, or if they just can't agree on terms, Bunting's going to be in some demand. Wayne Simmons, probably the end of the line. I want to say for Simmons, it's probably the end of the line for him. Luke Shen, he wants to stay. We'll see if there's that same feeling from Brad Treliving, or if he wants to go in another direction with the blue line. Zach Aston Reese, I thought, provided them with solid offensive depth. Has at least earned the right to play somewhere else if Toronto doesn't bring him back. Eric Gustafson didn't do a lot after that trade from Washington. Didn't play a lot after that trade from Washington. Jordy Ben, veteran player, depth defenseman. That's what you get with him. Eric Shalgren, number 3 goaltender in organization. Maybe a number 4, depending on the organization. And Radim Zohorna, who was brought in. Zohorna's bounced around a little bit over the last couple of years. Probably ending up going to market as well. And then finally, we have the Washington Capitals, where you have Connor Brown, who only played a few games this year before getting hurt, which is too bad because I really like Connor Brown's game. You have Craig Smith, who was brought in as a cap dump by the Boston Bruins so they could pick up Orlov, so they could pick up Hathaway. Craig Smith, not as bad as this contract made people think he was, but we'll see what he gets. And what I mean is, there are players who get a lot of criticism because they're paid more money than people think they should be. And I think that's what it's been with Craig Smith over the last couple of years. Carl Hagelin, another injury season this year. We'll see if he can be injury-free and play next year. Connor Sherry, I like Sherry's work ethic. I think he's a solid third-line option who can jump into the top 6 with injuries. And Matt Irwin, veteran on the blue line. So again, we don't have a lot of really big names, a lot of big stars here, but there's a lot of names. And so I would guess that a month from today, we are going to see a lot of signings. There'll probably be some big surprises as well. And with the flat cap, if we don't get some kind of a jump in the cap, and I don't think we will, with a flat cap, teams are going to have to get creative, which means trades. I'm guessing a lot of trades. But let me know your thoughts in the comment section below as always. Who should the teams target and who should teams avoid? Let me know your thoughts. Hit like and subscribe if you're browsing your way through. You just happened upon this video. Thank you guys so much for watching, for all your support. And this is why when I did that video a couple months ago now where I was talking about 20 free agents, that's why I limited it to 20, because otherwise it just can get to be a bit of a ridiculous board. Lots of players. But let me know your thoughts. Thank you guys so much for all your support. I will talk to you again soon.